The world got a little bigger, and a little smaller for one man on April 12, 1961, when Soviet Union pilot Yuri Gagarin jumped the next daunting hurdle in the space race by becoming the first human in orbit. He rocketed off the surface of the Earth and maintained an altitude of 91 miles, making a single orbit around the planet in a span of 108 minutes. Less than a month later, astronaut Alan Shepard took a flight towards the heavens and became the first American to leave the confines of the globe and break the atmosphere into the great expanse of the universe. While Gagarin and Shepard in flight would have no doubt marveled at their amazing blue planet below, should they have looked anywhere else, they would have seen a vast and untraversed frontier, the amazing, inky, uncharted possibilities of outer space. And for the first time in history, the idea of exploring it was no longer unattainable. The United States of America was enraptured by the immeasurable prospects of outer space. While the idea of winning the space race flowed strongly within the veins of every American at the time, it naturally permeated within popular culture and entertainment. While the geniuses at NASA were working hard crossing new boundaries in science, mathematics, and technology, Hollywood, the entertainment industry, and people like Walt Disney were working hard on feeding that hunger for the cosmos that every American was craving. Popular culture in the 1950s and 60s was meeting this with movies and television and comic books and toys. It was answering the unknown questions about what or who exactly there was to see up there and what it would be like when we finally made it there ourselves. Americans were hard-pressed to not be fully enveloped within the space race in the hope of a nearby future where trips to the moon and beyond were no doubt commonplace. But while people were only dreaming of the moon, Disneyland was one of the places where space travel happened every day. A place where you could truly experience it. In the dreamy vision of Tomorrowland, guests could blast off on the Astrojets or even take it a step further by participating on an actual rocket to the moon. Rocket to the Moon was an early attraction that allowed guests to join Captain Collins on an adventurous expedition to that mysterious lunar satellite. Visitors would enter into a circular theater where the screens in the center and top of the room served as crystal clear windows to observe the tiny planet from which they had just launched and the starry abyss above for where they were going. While the results of the space race were still in ebb and flow, one thing was for sure: every American could go to space in Disneyland today, just as they were sure to do tomorrow. And while the next attraction coming to Tomorrowland would lack the grandiose gravity of manned space travel and lunar exploration, its format would certainly be themed and tied to these expanding pop culture notions. This was the year flying saucers came to Disneyland.
Well, if I had it to do over again, I think, no, I don't think it would. I don't know. I hope I don't have to do it over again.
The year is 1961 and America's amusement entertainment options increased sixfold as the first Six Flags Over Texas opens in Arlington, Texas. The Academy Award for Best Picture goes to the Melodious Gangs of New York City and the silver screen adaptation of West Side Story. And viewers at home begin placing their weekly bets as to whether Rob Petrie will hit or miss the Ottoman as the Dick Van Dyke Show officially debuts. And Walt Disney himself is making great headway in filmmaking. Babes in Toyland performs tremendously as Walt Disney Productions' first live-action movie musical. And Disney's 17th full-length animated feature film, 101 Dalmatians, becomes the highest-grossing movie of the year. And by its 8th anniversary, Disneyland has welcomed 25 million people through the gates. A chunk of which were local graduates attending the first-ever grad night. Created as a special and particularly dry venue for the locally educated youth, the debut grad night saw over 8,000 graduating seniors into the park, as Disneyland stayed open until 5 a.m. and all the rides were open and available to them. In addition, there were souvenirs, photo ops, dancing stages, and live music from Annette Funicello, Benny Goodman, and the Elliott Brothers and the Disneyland Day-Nighters. There were special efforts made to keep the teenagers from behaving like teenagers that included chaperones and strictly enforced dress codes. These worked only to a certain degree, but in spite of that, Grad Night was a huge success, and it's a tradition that continues on every year to this day. 1961 would also see the debut of the brand new model of the Disneyland monorail called the Mark II. The Mark II would feature an additional fourth car allowing 108 guests per load. There were other improvements added to the cabins to increase guest comfort, like air conditioning, bettering electrical systems, and a fun seating option in the nose of the front car. But more important than the changes to the vehicles themselves was also the extension to the track. The monorail was lengthened beyond its Tomorrowland confines to now feature a stop at the Disneyland Hotel, where it could transit guests to and from their accommodations directly from within the park. This brought the track from only 0.8 miles long to just over 2.5 miles long. The addition changed the layout of the entire monorail landscape. Before this expansion, the monorail was simply a fun and futuristic attraction showcasing the promise and possibility of transiting in the future. But now, as the Mark II became a working model of actual transportation, the dream of Walt Disney was becoming ever realized. The future was alive in Disneyland. The flying saucers were born out of Walt's desire for Disneyland to have some kind of duck bump attraction. These were popular attractions in the Midwest and were generally smaller, single-manned, motor-propelled inner tubes on a pond or lake that were essentially bumper cars on the water. Imagineer Bob Gurr was placed in charge of growing the idea, but as new concepts were introduced and different designs and models were developed, the duck bump suggestion adapted into a hovercraft attraction. Bob Gurr designed and implemented the new flying saucer technology for optimal use in Tomorrowland. His designs are patented, and the US government recognizes Gurr as the creator of the flying saucer. The saucers are able to achieve movement by gliding over a smooth surface of air. The field was essentially a gigantic air hockey table, and the saucers, the pucks. Underneath the 16,000 square foot surface the saucers moved over was a vast series of holes, valves, blowers, and air ducts. Guests would be able to steer their saucers by leaning to one direction or another. By shifting their weight, they would relieve the pressure underneath to one side, allowing the valves in the air system below to let go and cause bursts of air that would push the patrons along. There were 64 saucers in total, only half of which would be in operation at a time. While 32 saucers would be out in the field flying, the other 32 would be unloaded and loaded, getting ready for takeoff. This e-ticket ride wasn't without its fair share of problems. Weight was the key to movement on the saucers, and if you couldn't control that properly, steering would become an issue. This had small children bouncing all over the space with little to no control over their direction, while heavier set patrons would stay put, not moving at all. And with the complicated network and power needed to push consistent air through, mechanical issues were almost daily. While the moon and stars in the heavens were getting closer to our grasp every day, guests could novelly satisfy that desire for space travel by spending an afternoon in Tomorrowland, via a rocket to the moon, a trip around the Astrojets, or a bouncy excursion on the flying saucers. Besides, this is how they were all going to get around in the world of tomorrow anyway. And that, my Explorer friends, was 1961. I don't know about you, but I'm still waiting for my own personal flying saucer that we were all supposed to be zipping around on by this time in 2019. Come on, Ford or Honda, I don't know. Make a flying saucer that I can buy used at a reasonable price in about 10 years. Anyway, hit that thumb, hit that bell, find us on Facebook. Until next time, we'll see you in the happy place. Bye!